Hi everyone, welcome back to Chapter 3 of Data Teaches YouTube series on Introduction to Python. Today we'll be going over Lesson 4, which is our final lesson of this chapter, which is on functions. So firstly, what is a function? A function is a block of code that performs a specific task. So they take in an input, which is also known as an argument, and they return a result. And functions also are named, so you can call the function when you want to perform the specific task instead of writing the same code over and over. And we've used functions in Python a lot already in the past few lessons, and a few examples of those include the print function, which is a built-in function in Python that outputs the arguments in the function call. And we've also looked at the type function, which is another built-in function that outputs the data type of an argument. So let's first talk about how we can define a function. And before using a function in Python, you have to define it first so you know what code to run when you call that function. And this is the syntax for doing so. And first we use the keyword def, and then we have our function name, and then the parentheses. And inside the parentheses, you can have any number of arguments you want, and then you have the colon sign. And the indented code below that is going to be the code that the function does. So as an example, I created a function named num_squared that takes in one argument x, and what this function does is it creates a variable squared that exists within the scope of the function, and we set it equal to the value of x to the power of 2, and then we return squared. So let's talk about how we can call a function. We can call a function by writing out the function name and specifying the arguments for our argument call. So as an example, how would we calculate the square of -1, 100, and 2 plus 10 using our num_squared function? And as a reference, this is how we defined our num_squared function. So here are the answers. To calculate the square of -1, we would type num_squared and then in parentheses -1, and the output of this would be 1, because when we pass -1 into our function, it assigns x equal to -1. Squared is going to be -1 to the power of 2, which is the value 1, and then we return the value of squared, which is 1. To find the square of 100, we do num_squared 100, and what this does is it passes 100 into the variable x. Then we do squared is equal to 100 to the power of 2, which is 10,000, and then we return 10,000. For the last question, we don't just have to pass one number into the argument, we can specify an expression that also evaluates to an integer. So in this example, we do num_squared, and then in parentheses, 2 plus 10. And 2 plus 10 evaluates to 12, so now x is equal to 12. Then we set squared equal to 12 to the power of 2, which is equal to 144, and we return that value, 144, which is why our output is 144. Now let's do some practice. Write a function called Celsius to Fahrenheit that takes in an argument called Celsius, returns the temperature in Fahrenheit. Then call the function to find out what 100 degrees Celsius is in Fahrenheit. And as a hint, the conversion formula for Celsius to Fahrenheit is Celsius times 9/5 plus 32. And feel free to pause the video to do the solution on your own and then come back and we'll review the solution together. So here's the solution. We first write def and then the name of our function, Celsius to Fahrenheit, and then in parentheses any arguments that we want for this function. And this function only asks to create one argument called Celsius, which is what we did, and all the code below this function declaration is going to be what the function actually does. So first we create a variable called Fahrenheit, and we set it equal to Celsius times 9/5 plus 32. And then we return this newly created variable Fahrenheit. And in order to find out what 100 degrees Celsius is in Fahrenheit, we call the function by typing the name of the function, Celsius_Fahrenheit, and then we pass in the value 100 as one of the parameters or arguments, which is 100, and the return value of this function call is going to be 212. Thank you so much for watching this video on functions and for finishing Chapter 3 in Data Teaches YouTube series. Our next chapter is going to be on data manipulation, and we'll see you in those videos. Bye-bye!